I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life I believed I was the problem. I believed I couldn't hold a job. I believed I wasn't capable. My family whispered behind my back and sometimes right to my face. But this past Christmas, everything changed. Because when my aunt looked across the dinner table, smiled that condescending smile of hers, and said, "You still can't hold a job, can you?" I didn't shrink. I didn't look away. Instead, I felt something shift inside me, something final. Because in that moment, I wasn't the broken girl they remembered. I was the woman who owned something they couldn't even imagine. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I love hearing from all of you. And if you want to hear how I went from being the family joke to the boss of my own company, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Have you ever been humiliated by your own family in front of everyone? Let me know in the comments. That Christmas dinner wasn't just another family gathering. It was the moment I realized I had one, not by proving them wrong with words, but by building something they never thought I could. And trust me, what happened next made every silent sacrifice worth it. But before I tell you how I got there, let me take you back to where it all started. Back to the girl who was always the unstable one. Growing up, I was always labeled the one who can't stick to anything, the flaky one, the disappointment. My sister had a steady career, my cousin was climbing the corporate ladder, and then there was me, bouncing from job to job, never quite fitting in, always leaving or getting let go. At family dinners, the comments started subtle. "Oh, Sarah's trying something new again," my aunt would say with a laugh, like it was charming at first, but over the years, that charm turned into judgment. The laughter became sharper, the comments became weapons, and the worst part, I started to think maybe I really was broken. Maybe I wasn't built for stability. Maybe there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unemployable, unreliable, unworthy. Into job interviews, into relationships, into my own mirror, every morning, it became my identity. I wasn't Sarah, the creative problem solver. I wasn't Sarah, the detail-oriented perfectionist. I was Sarah, the one who couldn't keep a job. But what I didn't know back then, what I couldn't have known, was that my failures weren't all mine. Someone in my family had been ensuring I stayed exactly where I was, at the bottom, struggling, dependent, easy to mock. It shattered me. It didn't start with cruelty. It started with jokes, little comments here and there that seemed harmless at the time. My aunt would say things like, "Sarah, you know you're not really the corporate type, right?" With a laugh as if she was doing me a favor by lowering my expectations. My sister would chime in with, "Maybe you're just more of a free spirit. Not everyone is cut out for the 9 to 5 grind." And at first I even agreed. I thought they were being supportive in their own way, helping me accept my limitations. But over time, those comments stopped feeling like advice. They started feeling like definitions, like they were deciding who I was allowed to be. Family gatherings became stages for my failure. Every birthday, every casual Sunday brunch turned into an interrogation. "So, Sarah, are you still at that place? How long has it been this time?" You know, consistency is really important in the real world. The words were always delivered with a smile, sometimes even with a hand on my shoulder, as if they cared. But I could see it in their eyes, the pity, mixed with something else. Satisfaction, maybe. Like my struggles confirmed something they already believed about me. When you hear something enough times, especially from people you love, you start to internalize it. I stopped applying for jobs I actually wanted because I didn't think I deserved them. I took positions I knew I'd hate because at least it was something. I sabotaged myself before anyone else could, because I'd already accepted the narrative they'd written for me. I wasn't trying to succeed anymore. I was just trying not to embarrass them. It was never enough. Asterisk, asterisk, if you've ever felt like your own family was rooting against you, hit that like button and keep watching because what I discovered next will blow your mind. Asterisk, asterisk, what I didn't realize was that these jokes weren't just careless words. They were part of something bigger, something more deliberate, and the proof was hiding in plain sight, waiting for me to stumble upon it. The real reason I kept failing had nothing to do with my abilities. It had everything to do with the people I trusted most. For years, I thought I was just unlucky. Feel like it went well, and then, nothing. Radio silence. I'd follow up and get vague responses or no response at all. Recruiters who seemed enthusiastic during our calls would suddenly ghost me. Ones referred me to would mysteriously evaporate before I even got a chance to apply. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't as qualified as I thought. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they could sense my insecurity through the phone. But then the patterns started to feel too consistent to be coincidence. There was the marketing position my old college friend told me about. She said she'd forward my information to her boss, and that he was excited to meet me.
Weeks passed.
She seemed confused. She said, "I sent you all the details, but you never responded." Except I never received anything. Then there was the company that called me for a second interview, and then claimed they never got it. I checked my sent folder a dozen times. It was there. I'd sent it. These weren't isolated incidents. in different contexts, with different people, phone calls that never reached me, emails that disappeared into the void, recommendations that somehow never got passed along. Like the universe itself was conspiring against me. I'd lie awake at night, wondering if I was cursed, if there was something cosmically wrong with me that repelled success. My anxiety spiraled, my confidence shattered. And my family, they watched it all happen with those same sympathetic smiles, shaking their heads like, "Poor Sarah, she just can't catch a break." But the truth was, I wasn't failing to catch a break. Someone was actively making sure I never got one. And the moment I discovered who it was, everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down. It happened on a random Tuesday afternoon. My sister had stopped by my apartment to drop off some old family photos my mom wanted me to have. Flipping through albums, when her phone buzzed on the coffee table, she got up to grab something from the kitchen and casually said, "Can you check who that is? It might be Mom." So I picked up her phone. The screen was unlocked, and what I saw made my stomach drop. It was a message from a name I recognized, Laura Trenemet, the HR director from a company I'd interviewed with 8 months ago. A company I never heard back from. The preview on the screen read, "Hi again, just wanted to confirm Sarah's not interested in the role." Correct. Want to make sure before we move on. My hands started shaking. My sister about me. I should have put the phone down. I should have asked her directly, but something in my gut told me to look deeper. So I opened the message thread, and there it was. Months of conversations. Laura had originally reached out to my updated contact info because my email kept bouncing back. My sister told her I'd moved on to another opportunity and was no longer looking. That was a lie. I was applying to 10 jobs a day, barely scraping by. Then there were messages with other names I recognized, recruiters, people who'd tried to connect me with opportunities. My sister had intercepted every single one. That I'd found something else, that I was taking a break from corporate work. She'd even gone as far as asking them not to reach out to me directly because I was going through a rough patch mentally. I sat there frozen, reading message after message. Some went back years, opportunities I never even knew existed, all blocked by the person I trusted most. My chest felt tight, my vision blurred. Smiling, holding 2 mugs of tea, I looked up at her and asked, "Why?" Her smile faltered. She glanced at the phone in my hand, and for a split second, I saw it, guilt, panic, and then something colder, defiance. She didn't even try to deny it. She just said, "You wouldn't have been happy there anyway." Sarah, I was protecting you. I don't remember what I said next. I think I screamed. I think I cried. Over how I know I threw her out of my apartment and locked the door with my back against the wood, sobbing so hard I thought I might break apart. The betrayal wasn't just painful, it was destabilizing. It rewrote my entire history. Every failure I'd blamed myself for. Every night I'd stayed awake wondering what was wrong with me. Every tear I'd cried thinking I was worthless. It was all based on a lie. I wasn't incapable. I was sabotaged by my own sister. Well, my someone who was supposed to love me. For days I couldn't function. I called in sick to the part-time gig I was barely holding on to. I ignored my phone. I didn't eat. I just sat in the dark, replaying every memory, every comment, every smug smile at family dinners. And the worst part, I started to understand why. My sister had always been the golden child, the successful one, the responsible one, the one everyone admired. And as long as I stayed at the top, my failure made her shine brighter. My struggle justified her success. She needed me to be broken so she could be whole. But somewhere in that darkness, in the deepest part of that pain, something shifted. The grief turned into something sharper, something hotter. Rage, but not the kind that destroys you. I could stay on that floor, drowning in betrayal, letting her win again. Rebuild myself in silence, and show all of them, exactly who I was capable of becoming. Asterisk, before I tell you what I did next, make sure you're subscribed, because this is where my revenge story truly begins. Have you ever used betrayal as fuel to completely transform your life? Let me know in the comments. Asterisk, I chose to rise, but I didn't tell anyone. I didn't ask for help or validation. I disappeared from their radar completely. Because the best revenge isn't loud, it's strategic and absolutely devastating. And trust me, what I built in the shadows would soon eclipse everything they ever thought possible. The first thing I did was cut the cord. Not dramatically, I didn't block anyone or send angry messages or make a scene. I just faded. I stopped posting on social media. I stopped sharing updates about my life at family dinners, which I suddenly had scheduling conflicts for. When my mom called asking if everything was okay between me and my sister, I kept it vague. "We're fine, just busy." When my aunt texted asking what I was up to these days, I replied with, "Same old stuff, nothing exciting." I became a ghost in my own family, present enough that they couldn't interfere. It wasn't easy. Part of me wanted to confront my sister publicly, to expose what she'd done, to make her feel even a fraction of the humiliation I'd endured for years. But I knew that wouldn't change anything. She'd apologize, play the victim, and somehow I'd end up looking like the bitter, unstable one all over again. So instead, I chose silence. Strategic, intentional silence. Because the loudest statement I could make wasn't words, it was success they never saw coming. Only gave the new one to a handful of trusted friends outside the family. I created a separate email address, one my sister couldn't access or monitor. I even adjusted my privacy settings on every platform, making sure no one could see who I was connecting with or what I was working on. It felt paranoid at first, like I was overreacting, but then I remembered those intercepted messages, those stolen opportunities, and I realized this wasn't paranoia.
This was self-preservation.
If I was going to rebuild my life, I needed to do it completely outside their view. No updates, no breadcrumbs for them to follow. For the first time in my life, I was working towards something that was entirely mine. No one watching over my shoulder. No one whispering doubts in my ear. Something unexpected happened. I started to remember who I actually was before they convinced me I was broken. She was ready to build an empire. I spent the first few weeks after the discovery just surviving, going through the motions, processing the trauma, figuring out how to exist in a world that suddenly made sense in the worst way. But once the initial shock faded, I started to notice something. All those failures my family loved to mock, they'd actually taught me something. Project management, social media coordination, event planning, even a brief stint in graphic design. I'd been everywhere. And while my family saw that as instability, I'd always been good at organizing chaos. At work, I was the person people came to when they needed something done yesterday, when systems were breaking down, when no one knew how to fix a process. In taking messy situations and creating order, I just never thought of it as a skill. I thought of it as just what I did. Scrolling through freelance platforms out of curiosity, I saw listing after listing from small businesses and overwhelmed entrepreneurs desperately needing help with operations, organization, scheduling, workflow optimization, things I could do in my sleep. I didn't need someone to hire me. I could hire myself. I could take everything I knew, all those random skills from all those failed jobs, and package them into something valuable. A service. I started researching, what do small business owners struggle with most? Administrative overwhelm, disorganized systems, no time to handle the back end while trying to grow. I could be the solution to that. Virtual operations management, helping entrepreneurs streamline their processes so they could focus on what they actually loved. The idea was small at first, almost laughably simple, but it was mine. No one could take it from me, sabotage it, or tell me I wasn't good enough for it. And for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind, the fierce, determined kind, the kind that doesn't ask for permission or a big investment. So I did. Rant through a Facebook group for small business owners. Someone posted a desperate plea. I'm drowning in admin work and missing deadlines. I need help but can't afford a full-time employee. Introduced myself and offered a free 1-hour consultation to assess her needs. We talked for 90 minutes. By the end, she was nearly in tears with relief. She's solved problems I've been struggling with for months, she said. She hired me on the spot for 10 hours a week at a rate I honestly thought was too high. But she paid it without hesitation. That first paycheck felt different than any paycheck I'd ever received. It wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't unemployable. Proof that my skills had value. Proof that the narrative my family had built around me was a lie. Worked harder for that client than I'd ever worked for anyone. Staying up late, perfecting her systems, creating templates, organizing her entire backend so seamlessly that within 2 weeks, she told me I'd saved her business. And then she did something I didn't expect. She referred me to 3 other business owners in her network. Suddenly, I had 4 clients, then 6, then 10. Word spread fast because I was good at what I did. And more importantly, I cared. They were lifelines. Every problem I solved, every thank you message I received chipped away at the shame I'd carried for years. For the first time in my life, I was being valued for who I actually was. These people didn't know my history. They didn't know my family's opinions. They only knew that I showed up, delivered results, and made their lives easier. Asterisk. If you've ever felt underestimated and then proved everyone wrong, drop a like and keep watching because what I built next will shock you. Asterisk, asterisk, but the best part. My family had no idea. Still trying new things and failing. Honing my skills and laying the foundation for something much bigger. Every passive-aggressive comment at family gatherings became fuel. Every condescending smile became motivation. They had no idea they were watching someone rise right under their noses. Within 6 months than I could handle alone. I was working 60-hour weeks, stretched thin but exhilarated. The demand was overwhelming in the best way. Business owners were hungry for someone who could take operations off their plate without needing constant handholding. And I'd built a reputation as that person. But I hit a ceiling. And I knew if I wanted to turn this into something real, something sustainable, I needed help. So I hired my first contractor, a virtual assistant I found through a freelancing platform who had strong organizational skills and shared my work ethic. I trained her on my systems, delegated client work carefully, and watched as she exceeded every expectation. Then I hired another, Tona, and another. Within a year, I had a small team of 5 remote contractors handling client accounts while I focused on business development, sales, and strategy. I formalized everything, registered my business, opened a business bank account, created official contracts and onboarding processes. I wasn't just freelancing anymore, I was running a company. And through it all, I stayed invisible to my family. They didn't know I'd hired a team. They didn't know I was closing contracts with clients who paid me more in a month than I used to make in 6. They didn't know I'd moved from my cramped studio apartment to a 2-bedroom with an actual office. I kept my LinkedIn private. I didn't update my Facebook. I didn't post success stories or celebrate wins publicly. I just worked quietly, relentlessly, strategically. I was building an empire in the dark, and no one outside my carefully curated circle had any clue. A miracle worker, the best decision they'd ever made for their businesses. I had testimonials, referrals, a waiting list. I was booked months in advance. And every time my phone buzzed with a new inquiry, every time I signed a contract, every time I transferred money from my business account to my personal savings, I thought about my sister, about the job she stole from me, about the years I spent thinking I was broken, and I smiled. It was coming. When the invitation came for Christmas dinner, I stared at it for a long time. It was a group text from my mom. Can't wait to see everyone. Dinner at 5, bring a side dish if you can. Love you all. With a string of heart emojis, my immediate instinct was to decline. To say, I was busy, traveling, sick, anything to avoid sitting at that table again. All I had this thought of being in the same room as my sister, as my aunt, as everyone who'd watched me struggle and smiled through it, made my stomach turn. But then I thought about it differently. I'd spent 2 years rebuilding myself in silence, working harder than I'd ever worked, proving to myself that I was capable of extraordinary things. I'd gone from being the family joke to running a thriving business. I had employees who depended on me. I had never dreamed of, and yet, in their eyes, I was still the same broken Sarah, still the one they pitied and mocked. Part of me wanted to keep it that way forever, to let them stay in their ignorance while I thrived in my separate world. But another part that had carried their words like scars for so long, needed closure, not for them, for me. Not as the girl they'd convinced me I was, but as the woman I'd become. I needed to look them in the eye and know, deep in my bones, that they had no power over me anymore. So I replied to the group text, I'll be there, see you then. My heart was pounding as I hit send, but it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. I didn't tell myself I was going to expose them or make a scene. I was going to show up as my authentic self, confident, successful, unbothered. If they asked about my life, I'd answer honestly. I'd let them, because their opinions didn't define me anymore. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew, if they pushed me, if they tried to humiliate me one more time, I wouldn't stay silent. Not this time. Christmas dinner started exactly how I expected. Glass smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. My mom hugged me tightly at the door, commenting on how thin I looked, which was her way of saying I seemed stressed. My sister was already in the living room, laughing with our cousin, and when our eyes met, there was a flicker of something, discomfort, maybe guilt, before she looked away. I didn't engage. I just smiled politely, set down the dish I'd brought, and found a seat at the far end of the table. For the first hour, everything was fine. We ate, we made small talk, people asked the usual questions. My uncle bragged about his new car, or trip she was planning. And then my aunt, the same aunt who'd been making comments about me for years, turned to me with that familiar smile, the one that looked kind but felt like a blade, tilted her head, and said, So, Sarah, you still can't hold a job, can you? She laughed, like it was a playful tease, and a few people chuckled nervously. The room went quiet for a beat. Oh, come on, let's not, but my aunt waved her off. I'm just joking. Sarah knows I'm kidding.
Right, honey?
She looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to laugh it off, like I always had to shrink into myself, to play the role they'd written for me. And for a split second, I felt that old instinct rise up, the urge to apologize, to let it go so everyone could move on comfortably. But then I felt something else. Clarity.com, power. And slowly around the table at my sister, my mom, my cousins, everyone who'd watched this dynamic play out for years without ever questioning. And I realized this was the moment, not because I'd planned it, but because they'd given it to me. So I set down my fork, took a breath, and smiled, not a nervous smile, a knowing one. And I said, Actually, I need to tell you all something. The silence was immediate and heavy. Everyone stopped eating. My aunt's smile froze. My sister's face went pale. opened my screenshots folder, the one I'd kept for 2 years, just in case I ever needed proof, and placed it on the table in front of me. For years, I started, my voice steady. I believed I was the problem. I believed I couldn't hold a job because something was wrong with me. And you all believed it too. You made jokes about it. You pitied me. Some of you even seemed to enjoy it. I looked directly at my sister. Her eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to speak. But I kept going. But 2 years ago, I found out the truth. I found out that every time someone tried to reach me with a job opportunity, my sister intercepted it. She told recruiters I wasn't interested. She told hiring managers I'd found other work. She deleted emails, ignored calls, and made sure I stayed exactly where I was, struggling, dependent, and easy to mock. Scrolling slowly through the screenshots, it was between her and people who tried to hire me, people I never even knew existed. My mom gasped. My aunt's face shifted from smug to shocked. Knocking her chair back, "Sarah, that's not," she started, but I cut her off. "It's all here. Months of proof. Years, actually. You sabotaged me because my failure made you look better, and everyone at this table watched it happen. All saw me cry, saw me question my worth, and not one of you thought to ask why. You just accepted that I was broken." The room was dead silent. My cousin looked between me and my sister, horrified. My mom's eyes filled with tears, and my aunt. She just sat there, wineglass still in hand, utterly speechless. I let the silence sit for a moment, let them absorb what I'd just said. Then I picked up my phone, slid it back into my pocket, and said, "But here's the thing, I'm not broken. I never was. And while you all spent the last 2 years assuming I was still the same struggling mess, I built something you didn't see coming." I pulled out a business card, simple, with my company name embossed in gold, and set it on the table. "I own a business operations consulting firm. I have a team of 12 employees. Office 3 countries, across 3 countries. And last year, I made more than most of you will see in 5. The shock on their faces was palpable. My sister sank back into her chair, staring at me like she didn't recognize me. And honestly, she didn't, because the woman sitting at that table wasn't the girl she'd sabotaged. I was someone entirely new. I stood up from the table, not out of anger, but out of completion. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd shown them the truth. Now, I was done. My mom reached for my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, I didn't know." I believed her. She wasn't cruel, just oblivious. I squeezed her hand gently and said, "I know, Mom, but this is why I stayed away. I needed to protect myself." She nodded, unable to speak. My sister finally found her voice, but it was small, shaking. "I didn't think for it to hurt you that much. I was scared." "Scared of what?" I wanted to ask. I was scared that I'd succeed, scared that you'd have to share the spotlight. But I didn't, because her fear wasn't my problem anymore. "I hope you figure out why you did it," I said quietly. "But I'm not going to be part of your journey to redemption. I've spent enough time carrying your guilt." My aunt, still sitting at the table, still holding that wine glass, finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Sarah, I never knew."
I just thought. She trailed off,
And I turned to look at her one last time. "You thought what? That I was a failure? That I deserved to be mocked? That it was funny to kick someone when they were already down?" She couldn't answer. And I didn't need her to. I'd spent too many years waiting for people to see me. Now, I saw myself. And that was enough. I left that house with my head high, my heart lighter than it had been in years. I didn't need their apologies or their admiration. I didn't need them to understand what I'd built it in silence. The truth was, I'd already won. Not because I exposed them, but because I'd freed myself. The girl who walked into that dinner believing she was unstoppable, and that, more than any revenge, was the sweetest victory of all. So, after hearing my story, I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent and built your empire in the shadows like I did? Or would you have cut ties completely? Because I know betrayal hits everyone differently, losing closure through confrontation. Others find it through distance. And some, like me, find it through becoming someone the people who hurt them could never have imagined. Here's what I learned through all of this. The people who try to keep you small are usually terrified of what you'll become if you're allowed to grow. My sister didn't sabotage me because I was worthless. She sabotaged me because deep down she knew I had potential. She knew that if I ever got a real chance, I might outshine her. And she was right. The moment I stopped believing their narrative and started writing my own, everything changed. The jobs I couldn't hold weren't the problem, weren't out of reach. Holding me back was their fear disguised as concern. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're not enough by family, by friends, by anyone who was supposed to lift you up, I need you to hear this. They're wrong. You are not the story they told about you, tried to place on you, their insecurity, or their excuse to feel better about themselves. But you have to protect it, your plans, your progress from people who don't want to see you win. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't exposing them, it's succeeding so loudly that they can't ignore it. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe revenge ever truly brings peace, or does it just feed more anger? Was I wrong for calling them out at Christmas dinner, or did they deserve to know the truth? And have you ever had someone in your life try to sabotage you, only for you to rise above it anyway? Let me know your story. I read every single comment. Rise about betrayals, about betrayal, revenge, and coming out stronger on the other side. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, the next video I have coming is even crazier, and you won't want to miss it. For listening, and for letting me share my truth with you. I'll see you in the next video.